Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the unbelievable trajectory of a machine that literally went from being a no-frills, kind of obsolete used race car to the absolute pinnacle of automotive collecting. I mean, we're talking about arguably the most valuable collector vehicle in human history. We're going to break down the engineering, the absolute racing dominance, and the frankly staggering financial appreciation of the Ferrari 250 GTO. So to understand how a single car, specifically chassis 4153 GT, commanded an eye-watering $70 million in a 2018 private sale to automotive floor mat founder David McNeil, well, we have to travel back in time. We need to go way back before the fancy vintage car rallies, way before the multi-million-dollar auctions. We're heading to the early 1960s to explore its raw, completely unpolished origins. Section 1. Engineering the Omologato. All right, so our story kicks off in the early 60s. Scuderia Ferrari was already an absolute powerhouse, but Enzo Ferrari, he wanted to completely dominate the FIA's Group 3 Grand Touring Car category. The plan wasn't just to build a really fast car, it was to build a machine that could seamlessly transition from a public road right to the starting grid of the most grueling endurance races on the planet. Let's look at this acronym, because the very name of the car tells you exactly why it exists in the first place. The 250 denotes the displacement in cubic centimeters of each of its 12 cylinders. But GTO? That stands for Gran Turismo Omologato, which translates to Grand Touring Homologated. And this directly ties into the FIA regulations of 1962, which said that at least 100 examples of a specific vehicle had to be built for it to be legally homologated or approved for Group 3 racing. Now, there's a really fascinating myth versus reality situation regarding that 100-car rule. It became this incredibly popular, almost romantic myth that when FIA inspectors showed up at the factory, Enzo Ferrari basically shuffled the exact same cars between different locations to trick them into thinking 100 cars were actually there. Sounds like a movie, right? Well, the reality is actually much more clever and completely legal. Ferrari bypassed the rule by extending the homologation of an earlier model, the 250 GT Berlinetta SWB. Because over 100 bodies of that older specification had already been built, the FIA rules allowed Ferrari to design a new body and, just simply update the paperwork. So no deception required at all. The development of this new body, however, was a pretty turbulent, highly collaborative effort. Chief engineer Giotto Bizzarini actually spearheaded the initial design, and he focused heavily on top speed and stability through extensive wind tunnel testing at Pisa University. But then, in 1962, there was a massive dispute with Enzo Ferrari. This led to Bizzarini and a bunch of other engineers actually getting fired. So the project was suddenly dumped into the laps of a new engineer, Mauro Forghieri, and designer Sergio Scaglietti, who really had to just step in and finalize the bodywork. The crucial thing to remember here is that those early prototypes, they were incredibly crude. We're talking far from the polished museum pieces you see today. The second prototype, famously tested by Stirling Moss at Monza in 1961, featured this rough, totally unfinished aluminum body. It literally had visible hammer marks, weld beads, and riveted panels all over it. Its ungainly, long-nosed appearance earned it some pretty unflattering nicknames, too. The Ferrari factory team actually called it Il Mostro, which means the monster, and the press, they just dubbed it the anteater. But beneath that ugly shell, it was already lapping way faster than its predecessors. And this brilliantly illustrates what it was truly made for. When the production GTO hit the market for about $18,000 in the US, it was an unapologetic, purpose-built racing machine. The minimalist interior completely reflected this. Listen to this. There was no speedometer. The seats were covered in plain cloth. There was no headliner and absolutely zero carpeting. Cockpit ventilation? That just came straight from outside air inlets. Basically, what you got for your money was a race-proven 3.0-liter Colombo V12 engine churning out nearly 300 horsepower and a brand-new 5-speed manual gearbox with an exposed metal shift gate, which, fun fact, actually became a hallmark Ferrari tradition for decades after. But everything was focused entirely on aerodynamic stability and pure, unadulterated speed. Nothing else mattered. Section 2. Dominating the racing world. So the GTO finally transitions from the wind tunnel to the asphalt, and its racing debut completely shocked the establishment. Over at the 1962 12 Hours of Sebring, American driver Phil Hill, who, by the way, was the reigning Formula One world champion at the time, and Belgian Olivier Jean-Debienne were initially pretty annoyed. They were actually upset that they had to drive a GT-class car instead of a full-race prototype. But the pair drove the new GTO so brilliantly that they ended up finishing second overall in the entire endurance race.
They were only beaten by a much more powerful, purpose-built prototype, the Ferrari Testarossa. Pretty incredible, right?
From there on out, the GTO just became an absolute terror on the track. It went head-to-head against some truly formidable, iconic rivals. The Jaguar E-Type, the Aston Martin Zagatos, and the absolutely fearsome Shelby AC Cobras. But the 250 GTO proved to be so technologically superior and reliable that it straight up secured the FIA's International Championship for GT manufacturers for 3 consecutive years. That's 1962, 1963, and 1964. Oh, and it was also a total master of the Tour de France automobile, winning it in both 63 and 64. It was truly one of the very last front-engine cars to remain competitive at the absolute top tier of sports car racing. Section 3. Obsolescence and rebirth. Well, as we know, the automotive world moves incredibly fast. By 1965, front-engine cars were rapidly being eclipsed by newer, much lighter mid-engine technology, like Ferrari's own 250LM. So Scuderia Ferrari completely withdrew the GTO from its official racing activity. By 1967, it was practically absent from international racing altogether. And you have to remember, at this point, there was no such thing as a vintage car market. These were basically just obsolete track toys. The surviving GTOs were relegated to regional amateur events, local hill climbs, or they were simply driven on the street as obnoxiously loud, incredibly uncomfortable road cars. Just to put that into perspective, in the late 60s, a pristine restored Duesenberg might sell for $50,000. But a used Ferrari GTO? You could easily pick one up for a 4-figure sum.
Section 4. The ultimate collector asset.
Fast forward to the late 1970s, and the collector car market truly ignited. And what was the ultimate driver of the GTO's jaw-dropping value? Well, it goes right back to that 100-car homologation loophole we talked about earlier. Because Ferrari didn't actually have to build 100 cars, they simply didn't. Between 1962 and 1964, Ferrari manufactured a grand total of only 36 original 250 GTOs. That's it. Just 36. Every single one of them has a unique history, a total unique racing pedigree, and remarkably, every single one of them has survived to this day. That absolute scarcity is really the bedrock of its entire mystique.
Tracking this data, we can really see the incredible financial appreciation of the chassis over time. Just look at this progression. Back in 1962, you could buy one brand new for $18,500, but only if Enzo Ferrari personally approved you. By 1969, we hit the lowest documented sale ever at a Cruise International auction, going for just $2,500. But then, the market suddenly wakes up. In 1977, Pink Floyd drummer Nick Mason used his proceeds from The Dark Side of the Moon to buy one for roughly $71,000. By 1985, fashion icon Ralph Lauren is paying $650,000. And then leap forward to 2018, and we're seeing public auction records absolutely smashing the $48 million mark, alongside private sales hitting an incredible $70 million.
Placing these two extremes side by side reveals what is perhaps the most dramatic appreciation of any physical asset in modern history. I mean, a leap from $2,500 to $70 million. Even considering the market crash of the 1990s, where values briefly dipped down to about $2.5 million, the trajectory is just staggering. It essentially turned a deafening, cramped, obsolete track car into a highly coveted billionaire asset. It literally became a piece of fine art made out of aluminum and rubber. So as we conclude this explainer, you really have to ask yourself, what exactly makes a car truly priceless? Is the astronomical value derived from the physical aluminum and Bizzarini's brilliant engineering? Is it driven purely by the sheer mathematical scarcity of only 36 existing chassis? Or is it maybe the irreplaceable sweat-stained racing history embedded right into the metal? The simple fact that these exact steering wheels were gripped by legends like Phil Hill and Sterling Moss. It's just a fascinating intersection of history, art, and commerce. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the legacy of the 250 GTO. Keep wondering, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.